Up next, remarks from Newark, New Jersey Mayor Cory Booker on how to become a great leader. And later, NAACP President Benjamin Jealous on leadership styles in the 21st century. These are from an annual leadership conference hosted by the National Urban Fellows. It's about an hour, 50 minutes.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. I am delighted to see you all again. For those of you I have just met, I say welcome to the second day of this incredible conference. I want to thank everyone in this room for being here and helping us celebrate 40 years of a mission of developing the best and the brightest people of color and women to be dedicated, courageous, accomplished leaders and change agents. So I'm so proud of what we've been doing together. I hope you felt as I did that yesterday was a fantastic day. It was just unbelievable. You know, I had like this movie script in my mind, starting with Senator Lugar and then listening to the Baruch family, hearing Wade Henderson, Lorraine Cortez Vasquez, Lisa Jackson, Governor Rendell, Secretary Roslyn Ali, and then to end with Congressman the Whip, James Clyburn. What a day, and I hope that your inspiration and your motivation is high to think of one thing that you will do to be the change agent, to be the person who helps to make our country stronger and better. That would be my dream, that yesterday inspired you to take one action that is in your control as a civic leader to make the world a better place. So it was quite thrilling. I thank our 40 fellows and mentors, our alumni, our supporters, the community leaders who have joined us, and of course our board of directors and the great staff. So we're going to have a wonderful morning. Couldn't think of a better way to start than Mayor Cory Booker. They are loud besides asking a lot of questions. And to introduce him, she says she may be off script, so we're going to hear something quite special. But to introduce him is Desiree Peterkin Bell, one of our great alums.
Good morning. My name is Desiree Peterkin Bell. I am the Communications Director at the City of Newark for Mayor Cory A. Booker. And I said I could do something, normal and just read the bios that are in your packets, but I really want to take time to explain why Cory A. Booker, in my opinion, is one of the most fearless leaders that I know. And so I've had the fortune in my short life to work for some pretty amazing leaders. I worked for Bart Peterson through the National Urban Fellows in Indianapolis. I worked with Mayor Bloomberg in New York City. And now I'm in Newark, New Jersey as a communications director. And part of my reason for coming to Newark was a conversation that I had with him, and lasted about 30 minutes. And I was trying to figure out, and I had heard of this gentleman, I heard of him actually since 2002, for those of you who haven't seen Street Fight, that chronicled his first time to become mayor, and he lost in that election. But what was amazing there was his heart and his commitment to public service. And so in 2006, when he won re-election, I'd been talking to his team, and I sat down with him and I said, this man, this leader is really amazing, and I want to work for him. I want to work with him. I think, and you'll hear, hopefully today, just a little bit about his story. But what's most amazing is oftentimes, especially in this cynical world, sometimes people don't trust their leaders, their public officials, and they distrust government. And so with his leadership, with his commitment and with his passion, He has redefined how the city of Newark engages with its constituency and how the city of Newark is defined inside and outside of the city. And so I'm honored to work with him and letting people know that the city of Newark will be the epitome of urban transformation. All eyes will be on Newark. And we've already been making tremendous, tremendous strides with his leadership. Things that people said we could not do with Mayor Cory Booker, we have done. And in 2008, we led the country in violent crime reduction. The city of Newark did that. And we are continuing to progress in a number of areas, increasing affordable housing, creating hundreds and hundreds of resources that had never been in the city before, a $40 million park expansion project, which is amazing, Crime Stoppers, Gun Stoppers, and a number of other just unique and innovative initiatives that had never really been in the city before. So I am honored to bring to you someone who has been a personal mentor to me and who challenges me all the time in a great way to strive and be the change that I want to see. Mayor Cory A. Booker.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Sit down. You're wasting time here. I can't believe this. We've got short time, and I want to get to questions. I really actually want to hear from you, and so I'm going to try to talk very quickly. I'm very excited that C-SPAN is here, so those strange insomniacs like me who are sitting up at 4 o'clock in the morning trying desperately to fall asleep that turn on C-SPAN can now have something that will really put them to sleep. My speaking. It's an honor to be here with people who probably have as much to offer me in terms of your wisdom, your ideals, and your passion as I have to offer you. And what I'd love to do is really just talk about one central theme this morning that's just important to me and that I need to be reminded of as much as possible, and then open it up and let's have some conversations. And maybe the best way I can exhibit this theme is starting with a story that happened to me when I was just a teenager, a freshman in college, flying to California where I was going to school at Stanford. And I know that trip from Newark Airport to SFO pretty darn well now. But this was one of my first times taking it, and I have to tell you, at that point I was a Stanford football player, very solid, about 230, 240. Now I'm a very not solid 230 or 240. But it's a blessing when you're that big and you are sitting in coach to have seats open next to you. And this was one of these planes that was just packed, and people yelling, carry-on baggage being thrown back and forth, and my 2 seats are open, and I'm starting to have this conversation with God. You know, please, Lord, let these 2 seats remain open. And then the door to the plane closes, and I say, dear God, you have blessed me. I am your favorite son. Look at all these poor people around me. And I started to stretch out, spread my stuff out, and then all of a sudden the door to the plane swung open, and I hear, as if somebody hooked up a nuclear-powered generator to a set of speakers, I hear this screaming, blood-curdling baby just yelling. And I strain to see what's happening, and I see this woman come on the plane with a toddler in one hand and a woofer and tweeter in the other. And I'm looking around because she's obviously not sitting next to me. She must be sitting someplace else. And then as I start to realize that there are no seats open on the plane, this woman comes closer and closer and closer to me. And now my conversations with God have suddenly started to change. And I'm like, dear Lord, why hast thou forsaken me? What have I done to deserve this fate? And lo and behold, she comes, these 3 bodies, to sit in those 2 seats, and she sits down. And I'll never forget, young as I was, I suddenly had this moment where I said, okay, this is either going to be the worst flight of my life, or it could be the best flight of my life. This is just a challenge to my creativity. So they sat down, and immediately I turned around. The woman was embarrassed. I started talking to her and trying to get her to relax. The baby wouldn't stop crying, and I tried every funny contortion of my face I could imagine. Eventually we took off, and I just started working and having fun, playing tic-tac-toe with the young boy, talking to the woman, using all of my bad jokes, like why did Tigger and Eeyore have their heads in the toilet? Because they were looking for poo. The tomato family was walking along, little baby tomato fell behind, so Dad went back and stepped on her and said, catch up. And every joke I had for a 4-year-old, 5-year-old, just to try to get through this flight. But before you knew it, we were having a ball. I'll never forget the movie Glory came on, and with Denzel Washington, I said, you've got to see this movie. And she's like, I haven't seen a movie in so long. I said, no, please watch this movie. I'll play with the kids. You've just got to see it. By the time we landed, we were friends. We exchanged addresses. I think I got one letter from the boy written in crayon, but I forgot about it and went on with my life. And 5 years passed. I graduated from Stanford. Another 5 years passed. I was coming out of law school. Another 5 years passed. And now I'm in a very tough race for mayor of the city of Newark, the race that Desiree had mentioned that was in street fight. And it was just difficult. We were having the hardest time raising money. We had this amazing core group of Newarkers as volunteers, but it was still very hard to build a campaign organization. And on one of my lowest days, on one of my most difficult times, I get this letter in the mail from this woman saying, you may not remember me, but you met me about 15 years ago on a plane flight from Newark, New Jersey to San Francisco. And she said some really kind things about that was the first time she flew with her kids and how my kindness really stayed with her. And lo and behold, she said, look, we own a factory in Newark, New Jersey. My husband and I have been following your career in the paper. We'd like to contribute money to you. And as a politician, that's pretty darn good. And in addition to that, she said, my son is now an older young man and would love to volunteer in your campaign. He became one of the best campaign volunteers. She had me tour the factory, meet the workers. It turned out this amazing experience, this wonderful lesson of the universe, that what you put out ultimately comes back to you, that the universe is a balanced place. And so the challenge I find is to remind myself of that on a daily basis, because life, unfortunately, is not about the big battle. It is not about the huge election victory or that moment where you're standing before the crowd and chanting inspiration. Really, life is about courage. And courage, I now realize, does not come when you face a fearsome foe. Courage is every single day getting up out of bed, going to work, doing a little more than's required of you, that's expected of you, and every single day showing acts of decency, of kindness, and love. Every moment affords us this powerful choice to accept conditions as they are or to take personal responsibility for changing them. That is life. It's about the little moments, the little things. My football coach used to tell me this in athletic terms, that life is not about when the Friday night lights are on you and the kickoff is gone and the cable TV channels are airing your events. Life is about what happens before the sun comes up, on those days long before the season has even started. It's about what you do when nobody's watching. It's about how hard you're willing to sweat and sacrifice and struggle when others are sleeping or resting or stuck in apathy. We've come to a point in our country that frustrates me sometimes because I see that so many people are willing to indulge in this belief that our democracy is a spectator sport, that people can sit on their couch at home in a state of sedentary agitation and watch, whether it's MSNBC or Fox News, and give wonderful color commentary about what's happening in the world and talk about it. And talk about what should be done or what needs to be done, or give wonderful criticism or critiques of the actors in the game, when really life is about getting out there and being a part of it. Democracy is a full contact participatory endeavor. And it's, again, not about what you see on TV. It's about what happens every single day about where you work. I'm giving my State of the City address in a matter of days, and every State of the City address, I talk about these people that inspire me, or more importantly, challenge me to be better. They're not the names we read about in newspapers. They're the people that do these stunningly amazing things by taking simple act after simple act after simple act and building a lifetime of love. A lifetime of love. One of the men, and I talk about in my State of the City address this year, is a guy that I affectionately call, and please don't think it's derogatory in any way, the lawnmower man. And the lawnmower man is a government worker. Who in New Jersey now, we're maligning them like you wouldn't believe. And here's a retired government worker who's living on a street in Newark called Elizabeth Avenue. And said he was looking outside of his window, and there was an abandoned lot right next to the high-rise building that was overgrown with weeds. And there were drug dealers on this block and causing a lot of problems. And then one day he gets in this mail, this amazing gift from the federal government that many people had, again, a huge controversy with, folks debating whether they should have been given out or should have been not, but he gets this stimulus check. And instead of engaging in whatever debates or discussions, he just looks at the stimulus check and he decides, I'm going to buy a lawnmower and I'm going to buy a weed whacker. And next thing you know, he goes out to this lot where the drug dealers were dealing drugs and starts to mow the lawn. And he mows up and down the lot and bags up all the refuse and puts it out. His neighbors were fearing for his life because he inadvertently had bagged up some of the drug dealers' stash, and the guys were on their knees, like opening the bag, sorting through it, trying to find their stuff. But he didn't stop. He consistently, day after day, was getting up and going out and mowing and maintaining this lot. Before you knew it, the drug dealers found that this was not a hospitable place for them to deal drugs. And a man retired from government simply by mowing the lawn got the drug dealers off of a corner in Newark, New Jersey. And interestingly, he became a hero in his neighborhood. But he's a humble man, and he just didn't stop. My staff discovered him because across the street from the abandoned lot is this huge park called Weequahic Park in Newark. And he noticed that the park was being maintained by a great county executive, but the median outside of the fence was just not being maintained. So he starts mowing all the way up and down this median on the side of one of our major streets. And that's when we discovered him. And my staff stops and says, excuse me, sir, are you a county worker? No. Are you a city worker? No. Well, what are you doing here? And he, in essence, says to us, I live in a building across the street. I look outside every single day. This street belongs to me as much as it does anyone else. He's taking responsibility. We drive by, walk by, every single day, people and things that should be touched in some way by us. Dolly Parton says it simply, if you see a person without a smile, give them yours. Little acts of kindness. Emerson has this wonderful thing. He says that what we have within can we see without. If we see no angels, it's because we harbor none. Do we have an angelic heart? Do we maintain that under duress, under stress, and under strain that can transform everything we see, not as they are as problems or frustrations or things that cause us anger, but to transform everything we see into opportunities, into possibilities, into gifts to us to manifest our essence of our being. Now, I know from watching other Newarkers, these courageous individuals whose names we'll never read about, I know that when people actually live that kind of life, live with that degree of integrity, when they realize that life is about the small moments, it's about how you treat the people that you work with. It's about how you treat those folks that come into your life. Do you affirm their humanity? Do you affirm their dignity? Do you leave them with a part of you? The people who live that kind of life have this powerful way to bring folk together, to inspire in each of us that same kind of behavior and that same degree of love. And to me, when that happens, that's when real revolutions take place. When sincere hearts of authenticity meet with other sincere hearts of authenticity to come together for a purpose that is larger than them, transformative change happens. I have to say I am far from perfect, and I have days that I indulge in negativity. There are days that I come home and turn on Colbert or Jon Stewart, just praying that they'll make me laugh once in a long day as I curl up on my couch and try to fall asleep and steal 2 or 3 hours before the workings of my mind wake me up again. And I have to say, though, that often what is the ability to make me hope, to make me not lose faith, is this idea that when good people come together, transformative things happen. Look, one of my worst times in my life was when I was a young public official. I had just won this city council seat and again had this bold idea that I was going to transform government, charged into City Hall as a 28-year-old, 29-year-old young man, the youngest person ever elected in my city, and I had political reality meet my optimism and hope. And reality was I was one of 9 council people who had been there for a long time and were not interested in really what I had to say. and that it actually took 5 votes to get anything done. And I was very good at setting records for being outvoted 8-1. But I just didn't feel like I was getting anything done. And I had probably one of the most adroit, sophisticated politicians in the United States of America, who was the mayor at that time, who knew and I was going to be a little bit of a political problem for them and started making my life really interesting. He was ticketing my car everywhere I parked, even when I parked with the other city council people in front of City Hall. That was really nice. We had challenges. The Attorney General had to come in and investigate why the city police were tapping my phones as mayor in my office. It was a really frustrating time. And at the end of the first year, when I began to question, why did I get involved with government? Why did I even do this? That I was doing a good job as a young, rabble-rousing attorney. And really thinking that government was not the answer and that this was really a waste of my time, that I was coming home that night and I was living in some high-rise housing, a place called Brick Towers, and the tenant president there, as I'm walking home, greets me in my funk, and she says to me, "What's wrong with you?" And I said, "Ms. Jones, I don't have time. I just want to go home. I just want to go to my apartment." And she goes, "Boy, don't you walk past me. Come give me a hug." And I'm like, ugh. And I walk over and I'm like, these are the times you just want to go home and crawl into bed. And I'm hugging this woman and I hug her and she goes, "Now tell me what's wrong." And now I'm angry and I say, "What's wrong?" And I just vented on her a year of frustration. This amazing woman of dignity. She stands 5 foot and a smidgen. But she's one of those figures that you look up to. And she's just listening to me with her stern face as I'm venting on her. Why did I get involved in politics? Why did I do this? And I started talking to her about the frustrations, can't get anything passed in City Hall, can't get anything done. And then I finally let her frustrations of the day, which was I had gotten a call from a tenant leader in the northern part of the ward that I represented, who was somebody who helped me get elected. And she called me up angrily that day, and this was what really had set me off, which was saying that there had been an incident there in these projects, and she asked me to get them more police protection. And my response to her is, I can't get the police to stop ticketing my dagnab car. How am I going to be able to get you more police protection? And before I knew it, I was yelling at this tenant leader in another part of my district. So I told her all about me yelling at Miss Sewell, and she suddenly looked almost compassionate, which was really not often Mrs. Jones' way, almost a little sympathetic to my problems. And then she looked at me hard and she goes, "Well, I know what you should do." And I said, "Really?" And she goes, "Yeah, I know what you should do." I said, "Okay." "I know what you should do," she repeated. I said, "Okay, tell me what I should do." And she goes, "I know exactly what you should do." And I put my hands on my head and I said, "Ms. Jones, I really don't have time for this. Just tell me what I should do." And almost as like she was getting divine guidance from God, she looks at me, takes a deep breath, and I'm ready for this wisdom from on high. And she looks at me and she says, "You should do something." and I'm like, that's it? And she goes, "Yeah, do something." And I was furious. I didn't hug her. I didn't look at her anymore. I wheeled around, walked into the lobby of my building, pushed the dagnab elevator, and my building eventually was public housing projects, and they were deteriorating. But the elevator was the smartest elevator in America, except for it was evil. And if it knew you were in a good mood, it let you ride on up. If you were in a bad mood or were carrying groceries, it would not work. So I hiked up 16 flights of stairs. I get into my apartment and I sit down. And I'm a strange guy because I really am a person of faith, and grew up in this small church in a town called Closter, New Jersey, a member of a great Baptist church. But I love God. I mean, I studied, in fact, I'm the only, I challenge C-SPAN fans to find another person. I think I'm the only African-American Christian head of a Chabad house in the history of the United States. I've gone to India to study Hinduism. I just love faith. In my office right now, there's very little in my office. On my desk is a statue of Harriet Tubman and the Bhagavad Gita, the Quran, the Tanakh, and a couple Bibles and some African prayer beads. Reporter said to me one day, he goes, "Gosh, Cory, if it's the end of days, you've got it all covered here. You just pick up whichever book works, I guess." So today I sit on my couch, and the Bible was there. I opened it up, and there was this passage on the page I opened up to that most people know who are Christians. It's if you have faith the size of a mustard seed. Somebody? Yes, thank you. If you say mountain move, it'll move. You get the Christian Sunday school star today. But most people don't know the next passage, which says, but sometimes you have to fast and pray. So I just decided to call an aide up, and I said, we're going to build a tent. And I said, I need you to go out and buy one, and we're going to build it in Garden Spires. And we built this tent, and I walked out to Garden Spires as we were preparing this, and I went to Miss Sewell, the amazing tenant leader of those buildings, and I said, Miss Sewell, I said, I'm sorry I raised my voice. I'm sorry I disrespected you. I'm here to help. I don't know what we're going to do to solve the problems in these buildings, but I'm going to do something. And I said to her, I'm going to stay here. I'll sleep here. I'm going to camp out here, and I'm asking you a favor. I'm going to pray every morning. Would you pray with me? And I said, I'm not going to eat food. I'll fast until we find some solutions. And she said, absolutely. She hugged me. We held a press conference. I challenged the media, and I said, this is the United States of America. How can we have communities all across this nation in which people live in fear, which people worry about their safety every single day? I said, this is not the land of the free and the home of the brave. This is not a reflection of the best of our nation, and we have the capacity to do something about it. And I said, the media, I think you're part of the problem. I said, you only come to a place like this when somebody's shot and somebody's bleeding. And I said, I challenge you to interview some of the folks that live here and hear a moment of their truth and put that on your camera. And lo and behold, they did. And long story short, as I went to bed that night, woke up and came sort of to a bunch of men surrounding me. And these guys were big and sort of burly, and I said, who are you? And they said, we are correctional officers at a local facility, and we saw you on the news, and we're not letting you stand out here alone, we're going to stand with you. And that began this amazing parade of people coming out to be with me under this tent. And it was community leaders from the neighborhood. This amazing minister who's still working with me now named Pastor Reddick was one of the first clergymen to come out there. And before you knew it, he's like, are you fasting and praying? I'm in, man. This is good stuff. And before you knew it, he was sitting there praying with me in the mornings. And before we had people come from all over the city. Soon a suburban town, a mayor from West Orange, who's still a dear friend of mine today. This is how we bonded. He brought his police officers from another town to stand with us in this community. Hospitals came out to do health screenings. I'm still very close to people from FedEx because they brought out tables and did job fairs and actually hired people. Folks donated computers. Before you knew it, it just became a bazaar. Things were going on. People were being hired, gospel concerts, you name it. People from New York City were coming over to be with us under the tent. Some Wall Street guy saw us and sent out like 500-600 pizzas to feed folk, and that was such a nice gesture, but really ticked me off because I was on a hunger strike. So at the end of it, the mayor came out. And with all his department directors. And you have to understand, I'd been praying and fasting for 10 days, and we were sort of political adversaries at this point, but there's something about humbling yourself before forces larger than you, be they community forces, be they universe, be they God, whatever you want to call it, that sort of puts you in a different state of mind. And I remember seeing him, and I think he had prepared remarks there and was about to have a press conference, but the first thing I just did is hug him, and he hugged me back. And I'll never forget, some reporter took a picture of it and put it on the front page of this section of the newspaper, me and him hugging. And he turned around and said that I'm not going to allow this to go on anymore. I'm going to bring police out here and we're going to find a situation. The owners of the building came up and pledged thousands of dollars to do security upgrades. And he promised that he would build a park because the kids really had nothing to play in that neighborhood. And now this is the point I really want to make, which is that it's not about that big moment. Because, to be honest with you, the problems, we didn't solve them in Garden Spires. And I met a teacher for a KIPP charter school on the plane coming down here last night who teaches kids from that school. And the first thing she said to me is, can you help us at Garden Spires? You see, the mayor kept police out there for a while, but didn't solve the crime problems, and I'm still working on them as mayor now. The mayor never built the park, and I'm mayor now, and we just cut the ribbon a couple of months ago on a new park and a new daycare center. But that's not the point of the story. We're still struggling in Newark. We've made amazing success. Over the last 3 years, there's just one city in America, Los Angeles, that has a better reduction of gun violence. We have 46% reduction in gun violence. Desiree said some of the other things we've been able to accomplish. And a lot of it is because of the real point of that story. The real point of the story for me, and it was a changing moment in my life as mayor of the city of Newark, as a public servant, excuse me, in the city of Newark, as an elected official in the city of Newark. It was a moment that changed my life because after a year of feeling like a failure, I suddenly was standing on this pavement for a final prayer. And as people came together, I had been fasting for 10 days, so forgive me if I was hallucinating or reading things into the moment that might not have been there. But as people came together and joined hands for that final prayer, and there must have been well over 200 people now holding hands, I felt when we joined hands a power coursing through my body different than anything I felt before. It's the strongest I ever felt in my life. I sort of got that Bible verse. I felt as if I looked at a mountain and told it to move, it would have moved. And I held on to those folks and held on to them with my spirit and allowed them to fill me up and the energy of that moment to fill me. And folks who were there were my favorite view of America I've ever had. There were black folks and Latino folks. There were white folks. There were Christian folks. There were Jewish folks. There were Muslim folks. There were non-believers. There were rabbis and imams and ministers and priests. And folks started praying. And I heard prayer in languages, Spanish and English, Hebrew and Arabic. And it was like this chorus to me that kept lifting me higher and higher. And amidst it all, I suddenly began to hear the words of our common ancestry. I heard the words of the great East African saying that says, when spider webs unite, they can tie up a lion. I heard the words of an Ethiopian saying that says, when sticks are in a bundle, they can't be broken. I heard the words of a wonderful Israeli leader who said, Jews together are strong, but Jews with other people are invincible. I heard the words of a Christian leader who was jailed in a Birmingham cell in 1963. April of that month, he wrote these letters where he said, we're all caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a common garment of destiny. I heard one of the fundamental pillars of Islam, a simple word, tawhid, which means we all share a common soul, a common spirit. But perhaps the most touching words that I felt in a way I'd never felt them before were these three simple Latin utterances that are the hallmark of a young nation, still yearning to be free, to be true, to be real. And those words were simply e pluribus unum. The tent came down and I went on with my career. Had big battles and victories and big battles and losses. But I really do believe now that what life is about is not those larger moments. Life ultimately about is continuing, no matter what. They asked Mother Teresa, how does she define success? And she looked almost surprised. She said, God did not call me to be successful. He called me to be faithful. This is the story of America. It's not the battles necessarily that we've won. It's those people for years and years that got up and strained at the chains of slavery, even though they themselves never saw freedom. It's about those people in sweatshops that tried to organize unions that were beat down, many of them killed, but their families still got up the next day and kept on pushing and kept on trying. We cannot let a finite disappointment undermine our infinite hope. We are Americans. Our nation was born in a way that no other country was. The first country that was not about the common lineage, not about everybody looking the same, not about the divine rights and kings and queens. We're the oldest constitutional democracy in the nation. We're the first country that's formed around a set of values articulated by imperfect men and women. And the history of this nation is ordinary people doing extraordinary things to try to make real on the promise of the democracy. That's who we are. Ultimately, we are democracy's agents. Will we infuse this world with our love, with our highest ideals, not with speeches and public appearances, but with our daily acts that if they in some way can reflect the truth of our being, we will ultimately enable ourselves to achieve the nation of which we dream. We will ultimately not just look into the promised land, but we will get there, and we will get there together. Thank you. All right, you guys are wasting time again. Sit down, please. Thank you. Thank you very much. And my applause are for you. I see 2 microphones, and is that what we
We're
want?
on.
All right.
Yes, we're going to ask a few questions, and I will sort of manage it if you will allow me. If you won't, I'll have you do it anyhow. So Nina, would you like to go first?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mayor Booker. That was very inspiring. I went to Newark Law School, so I lived in Newark for 3 years.
All right. Where'd you go? Rutgers or Seton Hall?
Rutgers, Newark. And I really, I really loved Newark. I thought it was a great city that had a lot of potential. But when I told people that I was living in Newark, they were like, oh, that's so dangerous, and that town, you know, city's broken down since the riots of the late 60s, and why are you going to school there, etc. So what are you doing about changing the image of Newark to, you know, people in New York or just all over the country?
So that's the biggest challenge that Newark has, is its reputation doesn't meet its reality anymore. When they ranked the most dangerous cities in America, everybody's like, oh, Newark must be up there in the top. And you know, other cities were all struggling, and I don't mean to disrespect other cities, but you know, Newark is safer than Orlando. Newark is safer than Little Rock. Newark is safer than Washington, D.C. that we're in. We were much farther down on the list than a lot of cities people would expect. So we're challenging reputational problems. And this is why, some of you might know, I went and I'm not responsible for, in any way, for the end of the show and being taken off NBC, but we took on Conan O'Brien because it's such an easy joke. It's such an easy joke. It's such an easy joke for late night television hosts to make, and Leno makes them as well, that, oh, let's find a city to use as a punchline, and people want to use Newark. When one of my favorite things to do is to go down, we have a new amazing arena, the most recently built in our country, that's just phenomenal, and I love when they have big shows, be they Hannah Montana or Ultimate Fighting, and people that are not normally coming to Newark. The Ultimate Fighting that we're going to have is, we already looked at the tickets, the overwhelming majority of the people come from outside of the state of New Jersey that are going to this, that have bought tickets to the show. So I love going down to Newark in the bars and restaurants and art galleries during the times when you have 20,000 or so people coming down and just talking to them. They're like, are you the mayor? I can't believe this is Newark, New Jersey. So we're trying to, a lot of creative strategies, and many of which Desiree is involved in trying to let people know the greatness of our city so that we continue to attract investment and residents. In fact, we're now the second population in the Northeast behind Boston. I love Boston, can't stand the Red Sox, but we are trying to get the word out. And this is the challenge to all of us, is to be creative in the way we do this. And the great thing about the next generation in America is that we have tools that our forefathers and mothers didn't have. And one tool that we're using in a very significant way is social media. So I'm a mayor of a city with about 300,000 residents, but I have following me on Twitter almost 1.1 million people who are now following the Twitter stream of a mayor of a mid-sized city in America, because we've really have jumped into social media as an opportunity, Facebook and other things, to show people the inspiring stories that I've told you, some of which in this speech, but also the beauty and the wonder that is Newark, that is urban America, and we need to change the narrative of cities in America to let people know the truth of who we are as a people, and that's what we're going to continue to try to do.
Question from?
Yes.
Yes.
My name is Carolyn McLaughlin. I'm from Albany, New York.
That's my mother's name, Carolyn. Nice.
She's a wonderful person,
It is
I'm sure. We had a 40% reduction in gun violence.
46.
46.
Yes.
And I'm really interested in what was the basis of that success? Because we have that problem. We've established a gun violence task force, but we can't seem to find the answer. So I'm interested in what
So the answer
strategies
really was
you
two
use.
things, and I've talked about them in the speech already, and I'll now be more specific about it. So we've been able to enable a 46% reduction in gun violence and categorical reductions in other crime. We've cut, Newark used to be, people thought, oh, it's a stolen car capital of the world. Well, we're down 40% on stolen cars as well. And so two things, back to the point of daily discipline of your ideals, your values, and your love. So we saw we had to do two things. One was run the police department with a much higher level of discipline, and looking at it as often especially those of us that are in the public sector, be it nonprofits or government doesn't often select for accountability. And whether it's schools or whatever, accountability is a very difficult thing to infuse into public institutions. Market accountability is easy. Everybody knows what the bottom line is at the end of the week, what the quarterly reports are and the like. Government accountability is difficult because, to me, accountability is three things. It's having clear measures, clear standards of what you want to achieve, having sophisticated measures for getting there, and then the most important one is having consequences for failure. And the problem often for me as a politician is we can just stand up in 4 years. Nobody's measuring us by saying this is what your crime stats are. It's often much more subjective than that. So we said, let's start trying to run our police department with a lot more rigidity in terms of accountability. And we started saying that we were going to start breaking out the business analytics. The leader of the police department I have is a genius at this. And we just started looking at measures and realizing there were ridiculous things that were jumping off the page that we were never held to account for. So, for example, we had police departments that looked like, in my opinion, scenes from Barney Miller when I first became mayor. Guys were working on typewriters that belonged in the Smithsonian Museum here. And we were not paying attention to where the rest of the world was in terms of technology, and we had to start figuring out ways to setting standards for us in technology. Another example is just doing analysis of the personnel. We had police behind desks that should not have been behind desks if we could streamline processes and systems, and we got hundreds of more officers on the streets just by analyzing that. We looked at when crime happened, studying crime patterns, and we realized something. You call us geniuses. This is so obvious, most of you would have said to Cory, we could help you out with that. But we did an analysis and simply said that we had almost over 60% of our officers on during the one daytime shift, and there's two nighttime shifts, 4 to midnight, midnight to 8 a.m., had the other third of our police officers split between those two times. Now, most of you might not know this, but most violent crime happens when? At night. So we are geniuses in Newark. We shifted our personnel towards nighttime. We had to fight unions, and let's be clear with ourselves. I'm the grandson of a union organizer for the United Auto Workers, but unions often don't necessarily align with the noble aspirations of institutions, be they schools or even government. We found out that according to union contract, we had detectives in our gang task force working Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. Now, I don't know about your city, but in mine, gangs don't work Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. So we started going through a very fierce analysis of crime and starting to come up with solutions that just leapt off the page. We saw that most of the people committing gun violence in our city were people coming home from prison, or people that had long criminal histories. So what are we doing to help people coming home from prison? And in fact, we find that if we analyzed the people coming home from prison, we could actually find them people based on statistical data that have the highest proclivity for gun violence. So we started creating all kinds of programs to help men and women coming home from prison. And I'm a very tough data analyzing individual because I don't want to ever mistake activity for progress. So we started looking at all kinds of problems, looking at examples in other cities about what people are doing good, and coming up with unique, never done before in America things. Like we found out that most guys want to try to find a job. They really do. But this nation is a wonderful country. Land of the free, we love locking folk up. And then we love to also, when they come out of prison, put every obstacle in their way to get success. So we fought hard. We just finally got through the legislature after 4 years of fighting some comprehensive bills in New Jersey to start pulling back on some of the obstacles. But we said, what can we do right now? What is something that we can do that makes a difference in their lives? And we come up with programs. We found out, again, analyzing data, that the number one reason why guys usually recidivate is technical parole violations. Hard to get your driver's license. It's hard to deal with warrants. You were in jail, but you didn't realize you had a traffic accident or something that happened that was a ticket you had to pay that became a warrant for your arrest because you failed to show up at court. So guys would come out and not realize, next thing you know, they're back into prison. So we said that there's a problem here that is more an administrative law problem. So the second theme that I want to get to is discipline, data analysis, accountability, but the second theme is the one I told the story about. It's bringing folk together. So I brought all the law firms together that would listen to me and come to a meeting, and I said, you all can make my city safe. Lawyers. I don't want you out there trying to lock up bad guys. I don't want you out there running around my city chasing after bank robbers. But you, through what you do in pro bono, we could start in Newark, New Jersey, the nation's first ever pro bono legal services for ex-offenders coming out of prison. And they agreed, most of it because I used a lot of leverage on them and didn't get it at first. Now they get it. They say, oh my gosh, I liberate the economic potential of a man coming out of prison by just helping him solve some warrants, get a driver's license, expunge a record. Amazing things happen. We've now done over 1,000 clients, and it's been a transformative impact, one small idea. But another example of this is bringing people together is I sat my foundations together. And one of the first reactions I got, this is Prudential, God bless them, they brought together the meeting, and one of the first things that was said around the table is, this is the first time we've ever sat down together and had a conversation. And I said, look, I'm mayor of the city. I'm setting our priorities. We're going to set the national standard in urban transformation in 3 areas. The first one is public safety. And I said, you all have to start focusing your grant giving in ways. If you're a healthcare foundation, you're a kids foundation, don't you know when people get shot, that affects your mission and your mission and your mission, whatever it is. And before you knew it, we were able to leverage philanthropy in creative ways. Newark, New Jersey now has one of the nation's largest wireless networks hosting public safety technology. We have gunshot detection, cameras, all paid for by private dollars, and have been catching people. We started a tip line, one of the most lucrative in the nation. If I think someone's packing heat in this room, if I think somebody has a gun in this room, and we were in Newark, New Jersey, you can call our anonymous tip line and just tell you the information. And we don't even need to get a conviction. We just want to get the arrest and get the gun. That's all I want. Then you call back and you get the second set of 4 digits. You can go to a few banks in Newark and get $1,000, no questions asked, $1,000 in cash. And trust me, in this economy, there are a lot of folk calling. Let me give you one last example. And then I'll go on to another question. In September, I was still upset because my fourth quarter crime stats were still too high. We were killing it, and bad metaphor. We were doing a great job in the first part of the year, but some reason towards the end of the year we were seeing a spike. So I'm always wanting to be creativity. It's always that theme of trying to manifest the change you want to see in the world. So my staff was getting worried about their mayor because I was out at 4 o'clock in the morning on the most dangerous streets, pulling over police cars, frankly, and often saying to them, until my police director begged me to stop. First of all, it gives me great joy as a young man to pull over a police car for once, as opposed to being pulled over. But just trying to talk to our cops, telling them that we're stopping crime before it happens. Our job as police is no longer just react to crime. But so I tried to live my own values, running around our streets, crazy hours where crime was happening, and getting engaged in that way as mayor. But I finally said, you know what? Let me ask the residents, because I know my history. I know that we brought segregation to its knees, not by charismatic leaders, but a bunch of folk in Birmingham, taxi drivers, domestics, who came together and set up this amazing system to shuttle people back and forth and stop using the buses. That's our history. I can give countless examples of that, going back to the Revolutionary War, when ordinary Americans, called Minutemen and others, were able to patrol and keep their streets safe. So I said, let's create night patrols in Newark. And I said, let's bring together a whole bunch of folk and invite them to come and sit in cars, private cars. We actually rented them, vans, and with volunteer police officers and firefighters who will put their lights and sirens on at the front of the caravans in the back and just drive through our most dangerous streets in the most dangerous times. And we did that from September until the end of this year. And we had virtually no instances of gun violence during the most dangerous hours, in the most dangerous places in our city, because not of the mayor and not of the police and what they were doing, but because residents stood up and did night patrols. And it's amazing. And if you go to my YouTube's channel or that, you can see actually the video of it. And it became so popular that we got well over 1,000 residents, from a woman in a wheelchair that was coming out, taking buses to get there, to 6- and 7-year-olds. We had Christmas parties, Hanukkah parties. We gathered in a garage and we fellowship first, and then we went out into the streets. We became so popular, people as far away as California came to do night patrols with us. Sarah Silverman came out and did night patrols with us, and it made a difference. So I don't know what your strategy is and what's going to work in your city, but the point is we can always do more, as my residents should hold me to account for, because 46% reduction is really wonderful. But we had a senior citizen this year already that was shot and killed by a stray bullet. I'm sorry, she's not a senior citizen, a 55-year-old woman shot and killed by a stray bullet. And so one shooting in an American city of an innocent person is way too much. So we can all learn from each other, but again, those two themes, discipline, daily discipline, analysis of the numbers, holding everyone to account within the organizations that you control. And then the second thing is bringing people together who are not used to working together, whether it's law firms, whether it's philanthropists, or whether it's community members. And you can do, if you're willing to do the things that other people won't do, you will always get the results that other people don't get. It's as simple as that. All right, other questions? Yes? Would you like to recite a Bible verse or two before we go?
My question, my name is Talia Gibbons. Niece of Thad Gibbons, who I think you're familiar
Yes,
with.
yes, absolutely.
It's my uncle. I grew up in Patterson.
All right.
And what I know strongly about Newark is that there are a lot of resources there as far as for young people. Going to school in Patterson, I was 16 years old, and I used to come a whole summer. I spent a summer going back and forth between the two cities, Patterson and Newark, to NJIT for summer programming. And I was just wondering, in Newark now, is there any work to expand and connect the resources for young people, even in and around Newark, to those things like summer programming for engineering and STEM, and getting them engaged outside of school or during the summertime that would then help with those issues of young people ending up incarcerated because they're bored with whatever, because there are a lot of resources in Newark. I was wondering, is there any work around that right now?
Yeah, there's a lot of work around. Every city does have a lot of energy around, and everybody knows the truth, that we wouldn't need police officers if we took care of our kids. It's much easier to build young boys than it is to repair broken men. And so that really should be the real focus. And often in America, unfortunately, we like to invest in the back end, in prisons and police, and not in the front end in building programs that actually serve our youth. So we're very active in trying to find answers, solutions. One of my second-term big ideas is going to be focused on those kids, sort of 10 to 21, that are at risk or sort of really facing challenges. Disaffected youth, I think, is a term that most folks are using these days. So that we're like, whether it's youth build, whether it's alternative high schools that we've been able to start in partnerships with philanthropists in the city of Newark, whether it's focusing on our juvenile lockup. I went and visited some amazing people at a New York facility called Rikers Island, and amazing people, amazing program. I'm telling you, amazing people who are trying to change the statistics, because the last study they had, 80% of the kids that were leaving were coming back within 1 year. I mean, that's crazy. 16-year-olds, 15-year-olds, for that to be their lives. So we in Newark decided that we were going to start a program for kids coming out of incarceration called the YES program, Y-E-E-S, Youth Education Employment Success Center. And so the ridiculousness in our city that we used to see, and really in a lot of places in Jersey, is I'm 13 years old, 14 years old, I was caught for a nonviolent drug offense or whatever. And by the way, we're starting youth courts as well in New York, which is something new. But the kid gets released, and then we don't think we have anything else to do. So the kid now has to navigate all of these programs that might be out there. In Newark, in fact, in a silly fashion, they have to leave the city to meet with a parole officer, a probation officer that was in East Orange, New Jersey. They'd have to go down to 2 Cedar Street because their local school didn't want them back to try to navigate that bureaucracy. So we just created the YES Center where we brought everybody together, and then a lot of these other nonprofits to one location, and now we're bringing the kids there so that they can get an array of services. So again, the ideas are out there. It's just setting clear values for our community. And this is the great thing for leaders like yourselves, is if you just get a small group of people together to say, what is important to us? So we said we're going to try to set the national standard in public safety, youth and family well-being, and economic empowerment. Those are the 3 things. Don't talk to me about anything else. I'm concerned about other issues, and I'll try to do my best and help other people that are working on those. But as mayor, those are my 3 values, those and reforming the government that I run. And so that's a simple thing, and this is the last story, and I know I'm answering questions too long, but I went to a city in the South, as asked to speak about some of the success we had in '08. We led the nation in crime reduction. And the very first story I said was simply this. I said, I want everybody in this room to close their eyes, and then at the count of 3 to point north, and do it slowly so you don't smack the person next to you upside their head. And if we did that exercise right now and had everybody open their eyes, there would be giggling, because for every person in this room, there would be a different direction in which we're pointing. So there's very few Americans that don't want to see their nation advance. But the problem is in cities, we're all pulling in different directions. And so the more you can coordinate action and say, you're a wonderful nonprofit over there, and you're a wonderful nonprofit over there doing wonderful things, but how can we better coordinate and get the information out to people in our community so that mother who is working 2 jobs, because in New Jersey you have to work 2 jobs, make twice the minimum wage just to meet the basic needs of a family of 3. So that mother that's working 2 jobs, or that grandmother, because in Newark, as America now, we see almost double-digit percentages of kids being raised by their grandparents, so that they are aware of the array of services that are available to them, and that those services are coordinated, and that we are doing an analysis to find where the gaps are to create new organizations. All right.
I have one more question. Keisha, I saw that hand up before.
Yeah. Hi, Keisha. Yay!
And if I may, since I get to ask the last question, I'd like to ask 2. The first question is, you said one of your missions is related to public safety.
Yes.
And unfortunately, in America, we have a population of people who've been released from jail called sex offenders. I know in Broward County, as well as in Dade, they literally have no place to live because no community wants them. And unfortunately, as a people, we don't talk about that part of the population. The first question is, in Newark, what specifically is Newark doing to address that issue? Where it's in terms of success and strategies, and then the second question is a little bit easier. And the second question is related to, as our president talks about volunteering and pushes everyone to serve, what is Newark doing to embrace that initiative?
Okay, neither of those are easy, but I'll really quickly. So that to me is one of our key issues in the city of Newark. We now know it, that you have thousands of people coming home every year, and 60 to 65% of them go back to prison, which in and of itself is bad, that we're paying close to $50,000 a year just to incarcerate them, not to mention the cost to courts, the cost to police, and so on and so forth. But those statistics are always used. People forget that in order to go back to prison, they're often committing crimes which have powerful impacts on neighborhoods and communities and the hearts of people. So we've set up an array of programs. We've been working at this now for 3.5 years since I've been mayor, and trying to set up a network of programs so people can easily plug in when they come home. And our programs range from everything from our pro bono legal services that we're providing, all the way to a fatherhood program that we created because we saw that the kids most likely to go to prison are the children of incarcerated adults. So we went out and found a model in Philly that we really liked and have now innovated upon it, created an amazing, it's really my favorite ex-offender reentry program we have in Newark because it not only has this amazing rate of getting people employed, it's cut recidivism to under 5%. It's only 2 years. Recidivism rates are 3 years, so we're not comparing apples to apples yet. But in the first 2 years, it's less than 5%. And what's amazing to me about the program that I haven't figured out a way to measure yet is to see the powerful ways that these men are reconnecting with their families and the mothers of their children, who often they wouldn't want to get up in the face of because I owe you so much money in arrears on child support and for so many other reasons. The men were not present in the lives of their kids. So it's programs like this that give me hope, but it's all about measuring. So we decided that we can't just have disparate programs. We really have to have a system. You come back to Newark, and this is what we are calling the NPRI, the Newark Prisoner Reentry Initiative. And we're studying this now, and we've partnered, by the way, I'm very much reject in America this false divide called left-right, Republican-Democrat. It's absurd, and it's so debilitating to actually solve problems. So on the local level, I don't have to worry about that stuff. So we brought the Manhattan Institute together, which is a right-leaning think tank, and we brought left-leaning folks together to create a coalition around this issue. Everybody seems to understand it, whether you want to do it from an economic analysis or whether you want to do it from a moral, social analysis. And so we've been able to get funding from a lot of Republicans who are interested in this. In fact, one of the things George Bush did before he left was give us a very large grant to do this program in a disciplined way and study its effect. So you can go online. I often publish things on my Facebook page and on Twitter. It's a very big issue for me that every single day I deal with. And yesterday was a great day. I came back from a press conference. 2 people greeted me. One guy that we fought like hell, who runs our prisoner reentry program to get the outgoing governor of New Jersey to pardon. Thank God he did. And the other guy was the guy angry with me because he had gone into our program and still had not found a job. Now, the overall program we have so far has got about a 20 to 25% recidivism rate, which is below the 60 to 65, but every guy is not served, and we have to continue to get better. The service issue, to me, is really a hot issue in America, thanks to our president and a lot of people in media. And this, I think, is the chance we have as Americans to distinguish ourselves again in the globe, is if we can find ways to effectively leverage the power of goodwill. Most Americans actually want to see change happen, but they often don't know how to plug in. And often when they plug in, the people who they're plugging into don't know how to do the few simple things that can sustain that volunteerism. Recognizing volunteers is very important. Anybody who volunteers wants to be appreciated. Finding ways to effectively communicate the needs and to match the needs to the volunteers. So we're studying that problem right now. One of the guys that gave me my best political advice of my life is Michael Bloomberg, and he said, Cory, you should become a billionaire first and then mayor of your city. God bless Michael Bloomberg and some other philanthropists who've started the Cities of Service campaign. Newark just won last week a Cities of Service grant. So we're now going to have a service officer on my staff that's going to be analyzing this problem. And I had a meeting in my office just to talk about service yesterday because we wanted to create a process online and offline where somebody can go to a Newark website, lovers of Newark, which are around the country, and see that, okay, I want to volunteer for a day. Okay, here's a place that you can go and just pick up a paintbrush and paint, or you can go to our animal shelter and help do this. I want to volunteer for a week. I've got a group in my office. So we want to start creating a real easy way online to create volunteerism and then have offline components as well. We're thinking about creating 3 days of service in our city that we're going to try to celebrate more, 9/11, Martin Luther King's birthday, as well as maybe a back-to-school type event. So we're thinking very strong because I've seen through night patrols and senior citizen police academies that if we can leverage the energy of folks, we can create a transformation. And that's sort of the last thing I'll say is really on that point. We are the United States of America. And we are not where we are today because of elected leadership. There have been phenomenal elected leaders in this world, but all change in our country has happened on the grassroots level up. And that's really where our power is. And politicians lose elections often because they can't connect to what's really going on in the streets. But I'm hoping that all of you as leaders don't forget that. That if you can find ways to bring good people together, you can manifest transformative revolutions by focusing on the granular, important issues. And I'll end with this quote from a great woman, and maybe I'll do it, paraphrase it. There was a great author, Alice Walker, who wrote a book, In Search of My Mother's Garden, and she had a paragraph in there where she talked about black revolutionaries. And she says in that, and I paraphrase, she said, the real revolutionary is always concerned with the least glamorous of things, about educating a child and raising his reading level from 3rd grade to 4th, about filling out food stamps for the elderly because they have to eat, revolution or not. It's about being close enough to your community to always be there for them when they need you. This is a true revolutionary, seen in the most simple of things. And that's what I hope we all can live as we go forward. Thank you.
I suspect everybody in this room will remember at least one major nugget. The do something is, I think, something you've taught us today. So God bless you. What great leadership, what great accomplishments, but what great devotion to doing the right things right. Thank you so much. Please.
Source of me.